Alright, the first thumb is probably close to 24 inches across, and it's got that little ironwood right next to it. So I'm going to do like a partial cut on that so it goes right with. And I'm going to try to send it up there. Now this tree is a leaner in the sense it doesn't want to go exactly where I want it to go. So there's two problems I have. One is it's entangled with this one right here. If I can make that drop most of the way, I will first. But if you look how it's weighted that way, it actually wants to go back towards the tractor more than it wants to go in the direction that I want it to go. So I'm going to have to wedge it over. I'm not going to bore cut from the side on this one because it wants to come straight back. So I'm going to cut from the side this way so I can get a wedge in here. Alright, from this point on it's a wedge job because I've cut it free and it wants to come straight back. There it goes. wedge work now. See if it'll go. See if I left enough hinge. There it goes. Alright, so we're going to do some more noodling with this saw. Now, I've had this one since the winter time, so I would say a solid 6 months on this saw. And the first couple of months were a little bit on the frustrating side. This is the G288, patterned after a Husqvarna 288 or 281, and the basic components of this saw seem to be pretty good with a couple of exceptions, right? And while we're talking about that, around the same time I got these Husqvarna X-Tough bars, and I got to tell you, they are excellent in terms of the way they wear. And this is a C85, nope, this is a C83 chain, full chisel, and one of the guys was saying they don't have the oil grooves like the steel. I don't know if that's going to show it, but they do. They do it on the one side, and then it's a full chisel chain, very much like a LGX or one of those older style LPX even chains, RS. You know, they have a little more sophisticated grind up there, and it works, you know. I'm not going to complain about it. It works pretty good. The one thing I like about that chain, the way it comes out of the box, is they feed very nicely in bore cuts. And I've said it a bunch of times, and I'll say it over and over and over. To have a chain that I can do a plunge cut smoothly with is more important than outright speed. So you can do all the cookie cuts you want, but if that's a chain that doesn't feed nice and smooth when I'm doing my bore cuts, I don't like it. It's just that simple. And you can tell I get a fair amount of bore cutting because the way it's wearing on the bar, right? And it's still not oiling as well as it should. I have a nice OEM bar oiling pump waiting to go on that saw, but I wanted to give the Farmer Tech a chance, you know. And the way it is right now, even with the new one that I put on there from them, it uses about half a tank of oil to a full tank of gas. And I kind of like to see 1-to-1 as a reference. But, I mean, it's not stretching the chain. I haven't adjusted that chain, you know, for what, 2 or 3 tanks of gas. So there's enough oil in there. And the chain itself is pretty tough. X-tough. So the combination works. Notice that I boiled the paint off the muffler. Did that milling. So we're going to have to do something about that, aren't we? Number one, I think I need to open it up. I think it could use a little bit larger outlet. It could use a little more compression. I'm kind of curious to see what the squish is. I haven't done any of those normal things that I do with a chainsaw because I wanted to see how they were going to perform as delivered, because most people aren't going to modify anything, you know, if they don't have to. They're going to buy something like this. They're going to spend their $300 or $400 and try to put it to work. And with the exception of the oil pump, I would say that's a pretty good work saw, because I haven't really done anything. You know, the oil pump is what I struggled with, but I haven't had to mess with the carburation. I haven't had to change a piston like the 395, none of that. Now, it doesn't make the same kind of horsepower the 395 does, the G395. Actually, it's not even close. for that matter, it really doesn't make as much as my stock 281. But it kind of misses the point. You don't compare these things to the OEM counterparts. You compare them to other, you know, $300 or $400 options. I think a fair comparison would be to like the G660, and that's tough, you know. I've said it before, the G660, the steel-based designs, they're a little easier to live with because of the external sprocket, internal clutch. That makes a big difference, and being able to get to the chain adjuster through the side cover, those little things make a big difference. And when I first was running this saw, the vibration was a little bit out of hand, and for whatever reason it settled right down. It's really not nearly as bad as it was when I first got it. It seems to start and restart and do all the things that a good saw is supposed to do. It's got enough power, you know. Nothing's fallen off on it. I haven't seen any big errors in terms of assembly like I did on a couple of the saws. I had one 660 where they didn't put in one of the cylinder bolts, or if they did, they actually attempted to put the third one in, but it was trapped underneath the muffler. It took 2 years for that to develop into a problem where it blew out the base gasket, because the other 3 were enough. I guess that's kind of a testament to those saws. And then I fixed that, and it's been out ever since, never came back. So this one here is beginning to get into that territory of, yeah, it's not going to win any races, right? It's not going to thrill the person who's into throttle response and cookie cuts and all that kind of crap. But for a person who needs to get a pretty solid saw and happens to like that pattern saw, the Husqvarna's, wants to do a little bit of milling, what we've been doing here, which is a lot of noodling. You know, this is the second trailer load right here, but I've been going through and noodling this because the grain's so tight, it's really hard to put an axe through it, right? Take a look at that log right there. You can see what the problem is. So I don't have my splitter up here, it's down at the farm. So I bring this thing up and basically beat the crap out of it. And that's the beauty, I guess, and that's the message, is here we are halfway through, you know, a year on the saw, and I've used it. This is not a saw that I just looked at. I like my 395, and actually this is actually a funny point, but it's true. I don't want to do this with the G395 because I like it, so I don't want to kill it. So this G288's been getting all this grunt work, you know, this bull work, because I don't care for it as much. It's not as nice, it's not as much of a, you know, a novelty to me as the G395. It's not really fair, it hasn't done anything wrong. It's just not as pretty, you know, it doesn't run quite as good. But some people would see it the other way. Now, I would say this saw has the chance, in its current configuration, of outlasting the 395. I know someone's going to ask that question. It doesn't have a lot of piston slap. It doesn't have a lot of those issues the 395 has. And, man, I put it under load. I mean, really put it under load. And to this point in time, it hasn't shown any sign at all of distress. Now, it could blow up tomorrow, right? But if it continues on this trend, number one, I don't really see the need to tear it apart. I will do the muffler, but I'm not going to tear the cylinder apart, you know, and do a no base gas or nothing like that. I just want to run this thing until it has some failure that gives me a reason to go into it. But until that point in time, I'm just going to work it. But I would say if I have issues with this G288, it has nothing to do with the Holzfforma version. It has to do with the basic design. Again, it's that external clutch, internal sprocket. Now, having said that, having the clutch a little further away from the chassis actually keeps the heat generated by the clutch away from the cases, which is one of the reasons why these things last as long as they do. It moves the bar, which is a spinning mass as well. The chain spinning around that bar is like you having a bicycle tire spinning and grabbing hold of the axles. So it takes that mass and moves it closer into the center line of the saw. And yeah, it does handle a little bit better than the bigger saw, just because it's lighter. And nice handle. That handle's Man, I've yanked on that thing. It's not bent at all. Pull start's fine. I mean, all that stuff that usually I would expect to have to change on the blue saws, none of that stuff is failing on that G288. I think they've done a good job. Other than the oil pump, that saw has been pretty much untouched. So anyway, I'm going to see if it fires up, do some more noodling. I have to fix that milling fixture, the Alaskan mill. I need a lot more of that. And that saw had no problem doing it. I did a little bit of video of that. But that Alaskan mill was bending the bar. It wasn't squeezing evenly. And when you crank down on the screws, it actually put a flex into the bar. So that has to stop. But anyway, let me take this thing and fire it up. Yeah, I want to hear a little bit of that rasp up on top. Yep, that's another tank of gas down. This thing is not stingy on the fuel like the Husqvarna is. And the other thing I can tell you is it sucks it all out. There's nothing in there. So, I don't know. Maybe this is a good breaking point. Got a little bit done today, but back to this saw right here. And you can see it's doing the grunt work, and it's standing up, it's holding up. I haven't had any issues other than that oil pump. And while it doesn't pull that 28-inch bar with the authority that the G288 does, it pulls it good enough. You know, it pulls it harder than the 565 maybe, you know. But the point of a saw like this is not how fast it goes and whether or not it beats the stock version or runs with a steel counterpart and like that. The point of a saw like this is you can spend $400 and do what I'm doing all day long. And I've got enough time on it now to say that it'll last for at least 6 months, right? And should I have the same conversation in a year, then it'll get into the category of, yeah, that's a working saw right there. So we're halfway home, halfway. And like I said, I'm going to do a muffler mod, paint the muffler again, I don't like that. And OEM oil pump is on the way. It's probably going to be on there tonight. And then we'll be back at it for the next couple of days, just blocking, doing what you're seeing right here. And then maybe when I get that Alaska mill fixed up, I'll come back to doing this, and we'll be using that same saw to do that if it's still living. So, while I don't like it as much as a G395, I can't argue the fact that it's been solid. You know, that's an emotional thing. It's not necessarily a practical thing. So, anyway, bye for now.